Oh, there we go.
There we go. Hey, good to see you.
Yeah, you too. And thanks as always, or thanks again for doing this. Appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, happy to.
Well, how's life been? Have you been busy? Been off? What you been doing?
I think, yeah, I think I've been busier than most, which is, I'm grateful for. Our business is in such a weird position right now that it's definitely in a downward trend. But I'm in New York, finishing up a movie. I have another 4 or 5 days on it, and then I'll be back in LA and start another one kind of the week after. It seems like I'm very busy, but I haven't. It's been a light year so far. This movie is 7 weeks long, and the next one's 4 weeks, and then nothing. So we'll see.
Nice. Yeah.
But I'm definitely grateful for the work that I'm able to get,
Oh, for
uh,
sure.
which is great. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how did you first of all, how did you get started in your career? Was sound mixing something you had always wanted to do, or did you kind of stumble into it like some do? How did you get to that point?
Yeah, it's I definitely stumbled into it in the way that I was in community college up in Seattle at Bellevue Community College, and I was taking film classes just out of high school, and I wanted to make short films and direct movies and write them, and but the sound of all my short films were terrible. I mean, just horrendous. And so I thought, well, let me take a class, figure out how to make this sound better, and um, and if I can make this sound better, I can be a better storyteller. Well, doing that, you hold the boom a lot, you learn a lot. And one of the professors had said, "Hey, you should, encouraged all the students. Everybody should try to get a job on a local film. Call the Washington State Film Hotline, and see what they're hiring for, and just, volunteer or be a PA or be anything." And so I called, and it was script supervisor, craft service, or boom operator. That's what they were looking for. And I said, "Oh, I've been holding the boom for the last few months on these different projects. Let me volunteer. Let me just do that." So I begged and pleaded with them for a month. Give me the job. I'll do it for free. I'll do it for free. And so I ended up doing that. And the first day on set, somebody asked me, "Hey, can you pass me that Apple box?" And I had no idea what they were talking about. And I went, "Oh, okay. The college is not teaching me what I need to learn to be on set." And so that was kind of the moment when I went, okay. In the first day, I learned more on set than I did in a year and a half of going to college and learning, all the ideas. And so that's where I decided, okay, I'm going to finish out the semester, and then I'm going to just start my career in sound, really, because sound was such a fascinating thing once I got into it, because it's kind of this mysterious, department that, as long as you're giving them what they think they want, which is good sound, then they kind of leave you alone, because it's a little bit of wizardry and a little bit of tech stuff going on, and they just kind of like, okay, as long as they're happy, we're happy, kind of thing. And so that was kind of you get to stay out of the chaos, as it is, that can be set sometimes.
Yeah. And in terms of sound mixing itself, and we can get into kind of specific projects in a little bit, what does sound mixing in film involve? So like what is your actual duties when you come onto a project? Like how are you involved within the sound to put it very broadly?
Yeah, so the production sound mixer's job is, it's the first sound that's hired for the film. So it's the first sound department that's hired for the film. We show up on, in pre-production, and get prepared. Depending on the film, if it's a musical, there's more prep. If it's just your standard, talking heads kind of movie, then we kind of show up a day or two before, and we are responsible for recording the actor's dialogue. Basically, everything you hear out of that center channel in the movie theater is kind of the production side. It's our responsibility to get it as clean as we can. Now, there's times where, on production, there's a plane that flies overhead that you have no control over, and so you have to make sure that you're protecting, the dialogue the best you can. But that is your job. You're basically recording the dialogue on set. Um, Sometimes, I like, in my career, I've been fortunate enough to do some musicals, and those movies are more intricate. You're in charge of you're in charge of the sound that you're recording on set. So, like A Star Is Born, all the vocals on that film were live recorded on set, and it's our job to make sure that we can facilitate that, and also record it in a way that doesn't sound fake. If the instruments are playback and they're miming to those and the vocals are live, how do you make that still feel, alive in the space? And it's the way that you mic it, and it's where you put microphones and where you record backgrounds and ambience and things of that nature so that you can make it more real for the audience.
And so
So
then,
that's Yeah, I was just
yeah,
sorry. So that's
no.
basically the general idea is that you're responsible for all the dialogue in the movie, and then on musicals sometimes the vocals and even sometimes live music. Just depends on the film.
So is your job then purely a production job? It's no, there's no post-production involved. Is that?
That's right. Yeah, we
uh,
we start the day we start filming, and we're done the day we finish filming, and then that all gets handed off to editorial throughout. And then there's post-production people that take care of the dialogue and do some dialogue editing and putting that all with music and effects. Some of the re-recording mixers do all that. So yeah, so my job is the onset part of it.
And you having mentioned musicals, so like you've done some really big musical films like, Joker 2, Color Purple, La La Land, as well as some music-based films like Maestro and Stars Born. I mean, I know you're talking about the kind of specific differences there. Were there any standout moments from any of those projects or any ones I haven't mentioned either that are were particularly challenging? Any sort of discoveries? Anything on the musical side that stands out to you as, or that was super just exhausting because of I had never done that before or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean those movies, you know, I mean, I love doing a music-based movie or a musical because you get to be much more involved in the crafting of the story and the sound and telling the story because, it's we've all seen movies where, the music starts and it kind of feels like you're in your own world and it just feels like they just dropped the needle on a record player, which is fine. Some movies don't need to feel immersive in that sense because sometimes they're just fantasies and there's unicorns flying through. But sometimes like in Joker, when Joaquin and Lady Gaga are singing and they're in the prison, you want it to live in that space. You don't want it to feel like they just put on a record and are singing along to it. And so it's, those are the moments when you get to say, no, 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 we can do it live. Here's how we'll do it, because the concern is always, well, we're going to spend all this time and energy doing it live, and then we're going to have to re-record it anyway because it's not going to be what they want. But, the newer, the way that we're able to capture it now is much, it's much better than, 20, 30 years ago. Now there's much better technology, much more interesting, ideas out there. And there are definitely films where we had to convince them, no, no, let's do it live. It'll be better live. And then, the studio or the producers get nervous about it because they've heard horror stories in the past, and you have to kind of convince them, and you put your name on the line doing it that way. Maestro was similarly challenging because it wasn't necessarily singing that was live. It was anything that was on camera being played or performed was live recorded. I had never recorded the London Symphony Orchestra in a 600-year-old cathedral that has a history of pigeons in the wings and and echo and that was that's definitely stressful because, you have all these meetings in pre-production and Netflix is saying, hey, just, by the way, that day is going to cost X amount of money, and that pretty much just toasts your entire post-production budget for music. So if you guys screwed up, that's it, and you're just like, oh, thanks for the extra pressure. Uh, but, that, and that experience it was just a joyful experience because you got to try things different. You got to do something that wasn't normal, on a film. So being able to record, orchestras and performances that really tell the story better than just a playback track is a special experience to be able to participate in.
Yeah, and talking about that Maestro sequence, that there's that one long take, and that's a pretty both in terms of the sound, the direction, and of course Bradley Cooper's performance is pretty unbelievable to watch it in all respects. You're totally
Yeah.
in in that moment. So that must have been a pretty, as you said, very challenging, kind of like scary to kind of get going. But then once you do it, it's pretty
Oh yeah.
amazing, you know?
I mean, it was terrifying to go into that, because we had done A Star is Born and we'd done The Mule together, and then this was our third movie together. And he's a wonderful director and very nice, and that makes it almost even harder because you don't want to screw it up. It's like he's such a good person that you want to treat everything with as much care as you can. And so, not that you would treat it poorly if they were not a good person, but you put this extra um, pressure on yourself to do the best you can for the project and for the director. And so, yeah, I think to be honest, on that film, I actually lost sight in my left eye for about 4 months because of the pressure. I went to the optometrist, and he goes, "Oh no, this is just pressure bait. This is just stress based. This happens to guys your age, And I said, "Well, what do we do?" He goes, "Ah, you just be less stressed." And I went, "Okay, got
Perfect.
it." Yeah, thanks for the help, doc. And sure enough, 3, 4 months later, it was totally fine. My vision's back. It was great. But it was
That's
like,
good.
yeah, no, I put my own pressure on myself to do the best you can, and then it pays off in the sense that the movie going experience is I mean, that performance in that moment is so massive
Mhm.
that it's
Hey,
like it was worth every minute.
anything for the movies, right?
Yeah, right, exactly.
And so then do with like an inside sequence like Maestro. So then I'm guessing obviously, an let's say outside sequences like in A Star is Born where they're doing concert, that's I would think a pretty different setup, right? Or different maybe approach to getting that sound correct.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the approach to, Stars Born is the idea is that we're going to pre-record all the music in a studio, and then we're going to play it in an earpiece or through a speaker for them live on stage, at some of these venues, and they're going to sing along to it, and the vocals are going to be live. And so we're just playing the instrumental out. And then the way that we are able to make it live in that space is, once we were done filming the scene, most of the time it was at lunch. We would set up an IR, which is it's kind of a fancy way of generating our own reverb. Like if you've been in an old, you have your old record player or your old stereo, and it says, concert hall, church, these different reverbs that you can add to songs. We wanted to do that, but customize it to every single space we were in, whether it was the Greek or Coachella or any of these places. We wanted to create our own, and so you do that through a technical process. You'd play this awful tone all the way from, 0 all the way up to 20,000 hertz, and you'd let it echo in the room. And with multiple microphones, later on, the computer would figure out, well, how big is this room? How echoey is it? Or how dead is it? And then you could add that to their vocals and to the original music that was recorded in the studio, and you can make it feel like it's alive. And then you also have the audience participate, whatever they want to do, cheer, clap, you have to make sure that's all mic'd. So we did that with surround sound mics and shotgun mics on each side of the stage. And we also mic'd every single instrument because there are moments where there's, bleed over, or there's something interesting that maybe the guitarist did that, could live in the movie as an alt. So you just want to capture as much as you can, because when you're on set with the actors and the talent, you can't you basically can't just let everything go and then hope that you get something magical in post. You want to get everything you can and let post production sift through it and find that gold, And so that's kind of the approach. And like on A Star Is Born, I think we did 62 tracks of audio on some of those, music sequences, to be able to, make it sound like a live, real concert, as opposed to a movie set.
Do then with non-musical films, I know you're talking about how musical films differ, but then with like action films, let's take like Birds of Prey or Fast 10 and lots of others, does that also present its own variety of challenges, or do those, because they're not musicals, they usually feel simpler?
Well, it's kind of it's a mixed bag. It's simpler in the sense that for the most part, you're trying to capture the dialogue as clean as you can. And then if there's an interesting sound that the sets make or the cars make, you try to capture that for post production, knowing that maybe it only lives in the editing room for a few months until sound effects editors get a hold of it and they kind of make it sound cooler. I mean, because most of the time, a movie car, like for example, like Ford versus Ferrari, those cars weren't real Ferraris. They weren't real, high-end race cars. They were, Ferrari bodies with Volkswagen engines. We need to make sure that these cars can run up and down a track for 12 hours a day for 4 months without breaking down. And so they put reliable engines in it, and knowing that the sound of those race cars are going to be added in post, then you kind of go, all right, my job here is to get the dialogue as clean as I can. Post production is going to add all this later because there's not much to get there. You're not trying to record a Volkswagen engine really good because it's a Ferrari, right? So you kind of pick and choose your battles in that sense, of what you're trying to get the maximum bang for the buck for the company, because you're trying to make sure that at the end of the day they have something interesting. Because a lot of the time, even sets, like Joker, the set, it's a beautiful set, but those floors are not concrete floors. So if you're trying to capture footsteps and things like that, it doesn't sound like the real shoes against concrete. They're going to replace that. So then your goal is to try to eliminate the sounds of the footsteps on set to get the dialogue as clean as you can, knowing that the sound of the wood floor set is not the correct sound. And so if you record it, it's going to be kind of living there and they're going to have to fix it. So yeah, there's a little bit of give and take, depending on the film. Fast 10, we did the LA portion of it. We just had fun recording the cars and engines and screeches and things like that. So because a lot of those movies, you're kind of bored as a sound mixer if your job is only recording dialogue. There are days where it's just stunts and action stuff. And so you kind of get, you try to give them as much as you can, because in those days, what else are you going to get? You try to get as cool stuff that you can.
It seems like it would be like a constant battle in terms of what you're just talking about with Joker 2 about like, oh no, sometimes it's good to have the steps in this recording, other times it's not. So it's like I feel like I would think every scene basically is like, well, no, we need to do it this way this time and not this way the next time, etc.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a challenge every time, to decide what's good, what's not good, what should live, what shouldn't live. And then also, how much are you annoying the actors? And they put a piece of foam on it, because it's not like you put a piece of foam on their shoe once and it's good for the entire day. It's probably every 30, 40 minutes you're reapplying it, because if they scuff their feet or if they walk around, it's falling off. I mean, it's just, so you're picking and choosing battles in the sense that there are times where you need more help than others. And so you're just, you're picking and choosing what you're going to focus on, because you can't focus on everything all the time. You're just going to wear everybody out, and then nobody's going to want to ever do anything for you. And so you have to pick those moments where you go, okay, let's ignore all the footsteps on this one. It's not a big deal. Nobody's even talking. Let's just record it. And then there's times where you're like, oh, all I hear is the foot, under their dialogue, or the dialogue's quiet and their feet are so noisy. Let's fix that. So you pick and choose the moments. We did a movie Saturday night, which was the 90 minutes leading up to Saturday Night Live. And Jason Reitman, who directed it, wanted everything live. I want to hear everything. I want the music played live. I want all the vocals live. I want, all these actors are going to be talking over each other. That's 30 actors in a scene. And so the goal is, how much can you hear, and really how much are you worried about deadening stuff? There'll be carts rolling down a hallway during a scene. Well, let's get the quieter wheels on that. Those are too loud, because we won't hear the dialogue. Even though we see the rolling cart, you kind of pick and choose what is acceptable noise and what isn't. So that's kind of part of the game, and just getting the best performances out of the actors you can without messing up the rest of production.
And on that point, are there directors? Because I was talking to a sound editor recently who was talking about how, the director's being so busy, it's very rare that he actually gets to speak to a director. With you being more on set, then are there times where, like with Jason Reitman, where directors are really like making the extra effort and focus on the sound with you, and then maybe others who don't?
I've been very blessed in my career that I do work with a lot of directors that are very sound oriented. Jason's always been sound oriented since the first movie we did. I did his first movie, Thank You for Smoking, and we've basically, I think we're maybe up to 8 or 9 or 10 movies at this point, but he is very focused on the dialogue and how it sounds. We even run him a hardline pair of headphones. He doesn't like a wireless set of headphones. He wants to hear the way we're hearing it, which is a blessing because it informs the rest of his crew that he cares about this part of filmmaking, and that everybody should respect it as well. And also, I have these conversations with him because it is a very collaborative thing, especially like Saturday Night or The Front Runner, where you have all these actors all talking over each other, and you want it to feel almost like an Altman movie where just everybody's going for it, nobody's waiting for everybody else to talk. Olivia Wilde loves that as well. Bradley Cooper loves that as well. The movie that we're doing right now with Bradley, we do this thing where we allow all the extras and all the background, in comedy clubs and in restaurants and anywhere kind of on the streets to just be loud, just talk like you're at a real restaurant. And, we're able to, it definitely hand ties a little bit of post-production, but it allows the actors to actually have to speak up over the crowd, give the performance as though they're actually in the restaurant. Because we all know how it is to be in a noisy New York restaurant, well, or noisy restaurant in general. You just have to speak over each other. And if you're shooting a scene where everything is perfectly quiet, then actors tend to forget that they're in this loud environment that it'll be created in post. So, yeah, there are certain directors we have these conversations with. The production sound team has a conversation with and say, here's what I want to do. Here's what I want to do it. And how do we achieve that? Or, hey, Steve, figure this out. Here's what I want. Okay, great. And then we figure it out and we make it work. And that's why, if you watch Maestro and some of those party scenes or the Thanksgiving scene, it all feels real because it is. Everybody's talking, everybody's going for it. And that's kind of what you need to sell those scenes. And with, modern day editing and with these great editorial teams, they're able to accomplish that. Whereas in the past, that would just be a complete wipeout sound wise.
Was it surprising to you getting started in sound in movies how like you're talking about with Ford versus Ferrari, how wait, this isn't an actual Ferrari making that sound. Like having watched movies, was that sort of like an eye opener? Thinking, wait, this isn't all like because I know it was for me when I first because I studied audio engineering in college and I that's kind of how I got interested in movies as well. And so I was like, wait, so these footsteps did it actually happen here, or this all that was very eye opening to me.
I mean, I do think that, what I'm always surprised by, because there's always a scene or two in any movie that you do that you're like, oh, that was garbage. That just sounds bad. It's like two kids in a park playing, but, behind camera is the 101 freeway, and it sounds like a freeway, but in the movie, it's this beautiful day at the park. And the thing that always surprises me is when post-production is able to salvage that and make it sound beautiful. It's always just kind of mind blowing the technology that goes behind, making the movies sound like they sound. I think, at a young age, I always loved, movies from the time I was 8. I knew I was going to make movies at some point in some aspect of it. That was just my dream. And so I don't think that it surprised me that a lot of the stuff was faked. Um, but the things that always surprise me is how well, because it's very difficult to tell when you're on a set, when you're on a movie, if the movie is going to come together or not, because you don't know every little ounce that the director's thinking about. And so sometimes, you're surprised that a movie turns out incredible, or you're shocked that sometimes a movie doesn't turn out well. Because you sat there and you're like, oh, we have every ingredient we need for a perfect movie, and then you watch it and go, all right, I guess it wasn't that great. So it's like those are the things that kind of shock me now, because they still surprise me. I'll make a movie and I think this is incredible, and then you watch it and you're like, all right, well, it wasn't so great. But or the reverse where you go, yeah, I don't know, I think we have it, but I can't tell. And then you watch it and you're like, holy crap, that was such genius. Because there are moments in actors' performances that you don't see because you've done, if you've done 10 takes of it, there's 10 versions of that line, and they've picked the one that is just the most golden part of it. And by the time you're done filming the day, you've forgotten all that. And so then when you watch it in the theater, it's kind of a magical experience to be able to see what was put together.
Yeah. Are there any films, either from maybe the last 10 years or so, or when you were first getting interested in movies, where the sound sticks out to you as either this is, this blew me away or this surprised me? Anything, any standouts there?
Yeah, I mean, I will say, I mean, at least in the last year, it's hard to remember, a decade's worth of great sound. But I mean, you look at a movie like Dune 2, I remember seeing it in IMAX, and I came out of the theater and I was just, my mind was blown. I mean, I was just like, yep, that's the best sound movie. Give it to
Mm.
him now. And, they got the award, and that makes sense. And, the production mixer Gareth on that is, probably suffered more than anybody in the rest of the sound department in that movie because, he's out in the elements, and that that does not look like an easy film to make, and so those are the things where you're just like, oh boy, but like even TV now is there's some incredible shows. There's the TV show The Studio.
Mm.
There's a guy, Buck Robinson, who's a production mixer. He's like, you watch that show and you're like, I don't, this looks like such a pain in the ass to make because, for one, it's very entertaining, but the camera just is nonstop. It's always moving. And if you know anything about wireless mics, you have 100 feet, maybe 200 feet before you have to be, before you're out of range of a good quality microphone. So the sound team has to be on the move. The camera team, everybody's on the move for every shot in that TV show. And the same with, there's that Netflix show Adolescence where it's like all one shot, right? For every single episode is one shot. Well, there could be 40, 50 actors talking in that over a 2 mile period. So it's like the stuff that we're all able to accomplish now with technology is just kind of it's mind blowing. And also, I hope that the viewers don't lose sight of how difficult this stuff is to accomplish because it does look effortless when you watch it, but there is so much care and so much, thought that goes behind every single movie. I mean, it's kind of a miracle that TV and movies turn out, half as good as they do because it is such a difficult thing. It's like it's the military without weapons. We bring everything, we lay out our own electricity, we lay out everything, we bring our own food, we leave, we try to clean it all up every 12 hours we're in and out shooting a scene. And every day that you're filming is a couple minutes of a TV show or a couple minutes of a movie. And it's like, it's just a massive amount of people behind that just have passion to do it because there are much easier lives than
Yeah.
making movies.
And you sort of already answered it, but is there anything else along with that or expanded on that that you wish people knew about sound? Obviously, because when I talk to people about sound just casually, who are just the, average moviegoer, sound is, a very kind of unknown, underappreciated thing. And so I'm always sort of eager to
Yeah.
discuss sound and, give it more attention because I love sound so much in film as well.
Yeah. I mean, what I will say about sound is there's a thing about the image and sound. So you can have not a bad image, but you can shoot a movie in black and white, with bad lighting and everything else. But if the sound isn't good, people won't watch it. Whereas if the image is different or not as good, as long as you can hear it, you're going to be able to tell that story because is the image is very important to a movie. But if you have bad sound, people will turn it off. So the importance of, good sound dialogue is so important to telling the story because it's one of those things that we're used to being able to hear properly. We want to hear what they're saying, whereas if the image is all over the place, the cinematographer graded everything red and then this scene is black and white and then this is blue. We all accept it as the viewer, but if the sound isn't kind of crisp and understandable throughout the whole movie, then you're going to lose the audience. And so it's critical to have that component that is a constant, which is good, understandable dialogue. And the difficulty in getting that in the real world it's just so much. You can have issues with wind. It can be a windy day, on Ford versus Ferrari, we had super windy days at the track, but all these guys have short hair and t-shirts. And so you can't see that the wind is blowing at 40 miles an hour. And so the wind shouldn't have a sound. It should just be their dialogue nice and clean. And so how do you accomplish that on these windy days? Well, you have these little pieces of foam and furry, look like little fur patches that you put over the microphones and you're hiding it under their shirts. And, there's a lot of care and effort put into making it sound as good as it is. So I think I think if you take anything away from it, the goal is always, because my even my parents were like, well, don't they re-record everything in post-production? It's like, no, no, no. The goal is to record everything live on set, dialogue wise, and and to give as little re-recording time to the actors in post-production as possible because you want everything to live. Sometimes they have to add dialogue later for the story, on the back of somebody's head to explain why they didn't go down the hall when they should have gone down the hall, whatever it is, those story moments. But for the most part, sound is something that we always, strive to get live on set. That is kind of the goal.
Yeah. Well, we're just about out of time. I know you were sort of touching on it at the very beginning. Is there anything else recent or anything else coming up for you that you either can talk about or anything that is interesting?
Yeah, I mean, we're doing right now. I'm in New York doing a Bradley Cooper movie. He's directing a movie called "Is This Thing On?" It probably won't come out this year. It might come out end of the year. Hard to tell, but it's a Will Arnett, um, you know, I guess comedy about divorce. I don't know if that sounds funny, but
Yeah.
it's an interesting film because it's a departure from a your standard, not standard, but your music films that he's done two in a row. But it's an interesting challenge because we are trying to make all the dialogue and all the sets and scenes feel live, almost documentary style, where you're just showing up to a nightclub and or a comedy store and you're just getting the vibe of the room. And so that it presents its own challenges, but um, in a certain way, it's a special movie. Because it's getting his whole team back together and making another film. So those are always fun because you have a great crew of people and with a lot of heart put behind it, and I think that's the exciting part of our business.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, Steve, thank you so much for taking the time. I feel like we've just in about a half hour, I feel like I've already learned quite a bit. And
Oh, good.
um, I would love to have you on again sometime soon. And I love, as I've said before, I love sound and film, and you've been a part of so many fantastic projects that I really love and hold close. So, you have a very integral part to that. So I really appreciate the work that you do. And yeah, it's just really nice talking to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I mean, it's been a blast. Your podcast is fantastic. I've listened to a bunch of episodes, and it's
Oh,
just it's informative and it's fun, and hopefully I didn't bore the crap out of your viewers.
no,
But
no, no.
yeah, we try in our own ways here, and just to enjoy listening to some movies.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, I'll talk to you soon and take care. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much.
Bye.
All right, I'll see you.